Welcome to today's episode of the Heaven and Elle podcast. I am your host, Elle Edwards, delighted to be here sharing today's episode with you. Today's episode is for those times, as you may have seen in the description or the show notes, for those times when you're feeling a bit, because we all have days like that. Now, one of the things that I am quite keen for you to know, as your resident silver lining spotter, and as somebody who shows up most weekdays with a bright yellow background and a smile on her face, and incidentally, we discovered I have a new smile wrinkle today. My husband looked at me and said, "Oh, have you scratched your face?" And I looked in the mirror, and I don't know if you probably can't see it on the camera. I went, "No, that's a new wrinkle." But then I smiled and said, "Oh, but it's a smile wrinkle, so we can live with that." But as somebody who does like to smile, like I don't like feeling for very long, I'll be quite honest with you, and I love helping other people smile. But there is this temptation, however, if that's all you see of me, is that you can have this false idea that Elle never feels meh. Elle never has days where she feels a bit like, ugh, or moments in days where she doesn't really want to. So, I know I've shared this before, but today is another time to remind you that everybody has those days or those moments in days where they feel a bit like, ugh, or I don't want to, or a bit tired. Even if you've had a really good sleep. So earlier on, I was feeling like, just really tired. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. I had a really good sleep. I haven't got time to feel tired. What's going on? This is nonsense. And have you noticed, incidentally, that when you're feeling a bit and then you explore why you're feeling and then you might give yourself a hard time of feeling and then it makes you feel more It's like this perpetual self-fulfilling prophecy that has this tendency to spiral you downwards. We are here today to acknowledge that and hopefully help you, if not spiral upwards, to at least help you stop where you are so that you can then move forward from there. So I'm going to be quite transparent with you. Today I had one of those days where I was just like, I was feeling really overwhelmed by so many different ideas and inputs and thoughts, and like it was just a lot. I was saying to Celia, I could like feel my mind just going 100 miles an hour. And as much as it is great to have ideas and be excited and have input from other people and all the rest of it, when it then makes you then just either freeze or just get lost so you can't do any of it, if you stay like that for too long, that's not terribly helpful. So I was like, I don't like that very much. So I'm going to share with you what I shared with Celia. It's like, right, I've had enough of this now. I'm going to go and sit with Sam, Holy Spirit. And so I put my headphones in and I was there with my notebook and we just sort of acknowledged. I said, you know what, I'm not enjoying these feelings and I'm really not kind of enjoying feeling overwhelmed, and what do you think about that? And then I wrote down what I heard and I actually shared it for the Love Note in the playground today. And the reminder really was that there's a couple of reminders really. The one reminder was actually around those inputs. And playground ladies, you're going to hear that this is something that you've already seen in the playground today. Inputs from other people, and yes, I do recognise the irony of the fact that I am here sharing this with you. I am adding to your inputs. I've got to acknowledge that. So having acknowledged that, it is great to have input from other people, whether that's through things like this, whether it's through reading, whether it's through conversation. And at the same time, you want to be careful and pay attention to those times when those inputs just feel overwhelming and too much and cause you to stop and bar you from taking action. I couldn't even find the word then. That feeling, yeah? I think we demonstrated it with a lack of words there. When all those inputs, when you've got so much coming at you that it's just like, deer in headlights, which one do we do first? The reminder from Holy Spirit then is to pause and go back to Him. Because God is with you all the time, leading you, guiding you, your teacher, your counsellor. As an aside, the other reminder He gave me is that if you are walking this out in relationship with Him, if you're having those daily conversations, He knows your heart, if He knows that He has your attention and that you are asking Him questions and listening, He doesn't need to use a third party to give you new instruction or a new assignment. So yes, sometimes we'll have things spoken to us. We're like, ooh, and they might remind us of things that have come up in the past, perhaps, or they might be nudges around things. But more often than not, when other people are speaking into your life, those things are meant to be confirmation or encouragement. God doesn't usually tell you brand new information through other people. He will sometimes. Sometimes, particularly if we're in a season where we're just really not listening to Him, or where we're not really paying attention, or we're just sort of sleepwalking a little bit, then yeah, He totally will take advantage of other people in a good way to nudge you out of that, because he loves you. He doesn't want you to stay stuck and just same old. He wants you to thrive and do a joyful life with him. At the same time, though, I don't ever want you to run away with this idea that every single thing, every single input you get, you don't have to act on all of it. You can pause and ask God what he says about that stuff. And so when I actually wrote out the show notes for this episode, I didn't exactly know we were going to go there and cover that little bit of it, but we're going with the flow. So that feels important, because I know that for myself, there have been times where people say things and you're like, and sometimes they will, the things that you hear from somebody else, you can just park them and go, okay, I don't know what that means, but I'm sure God will illuminate it further when the time is right. So we can hear from other people and take those things on board, but you don't have to act on them straight away. But more than anything, the real reminder, the one thing, remember I promised you in the show notes, the one thing that you can do that isn't about burying your head in the sand, it isn't about playing pretend. One thing that you can do when you're having a bit of a moment is I would encourage you, talk to Holy Spirit about it. Just acknowledge how you're feeling and then go, okay, I'm not really enjoying this feeling. How can we move forward from here? It will shift everything. Even when you still have, if one of the reasons that you're feeling overwhelmed is because you have lots of things to do, for example, those things won't magically get done. But there is something incredible about the way that Holy Spirit works, has this ability to shift our perspective on stuff. And sometimes, even when the actual act of talking to him about it, we then step into it and then do it. We find the thing that we were maybe dreading doing wasn't so awful after all. But more than anything, that reminder, you don't have to stay feeling stuck and meh. You know, we are never, ever alone. And I mean that in a really encouraging, empowering way. You know, there's that verse in the Bible, one of the Psalms, I'm going to completely slaughter it. It's the one where David talks about, like, where can I go? If I go up to the heavens, you're there. If I go down to the depths, you're there. From east, west, I can't escape you. And some people, if you're in a season where you really just don't really want to be doing God right now, then that can feel like intimidating. But my hope and my prayer is that most the people who enjoy this podcast, that's not you. You're wanting to do life with God, and so, you know, it is meant to be an encouragement. And so, be encouraged, just like that. Magic. Be encouraged. No, I know it's not as simple as that, but there's that reminder. Give it to God, take it with him, take it to him, explore with him, be real about how you're feeling, and just trust that he knows you, he loves you, he's got your best, and he will help you shift and move through those things. Even if you have to stay in those feelings for a bit longer. You know, sometimes, depending on the context, it's hard for me to give examples because I don't know what context you're in today, but depending on the context, we have to feel those feelings for a bit longer. The immediate thought that comes to mind is if somebody dies, for example, or you lose a pet. When Charlie died back in January, yes, I talked to God about it a lot, but I had to feel those feelings, and you have to go through a period of grief. You can't rush that process. And so talking to God about it isn't about magically making everything better. It's about another way to step into that relationship, knowing that he loves you, and that he can be there cradling you and comforting you, even when you're in the midst of those feelings. So I hope that's of encouragement to you. And as always, of course, you know, we have Holy Spirit, we're Father, Son, Holy Spirit in relationship with God. We're also called into community with people. So if you don't have that community support, youier.com/join is where you can find out about ours. In the meantime, though, thank you for being here. Thank you for joining me, and I shall catch up with you tomorrow.